Welcome to part 3 of our 3-part English masterclass on government finance and inequality. In parts 1 and 2, we built the state budget and explored deficits and debt. Now we turn to the other side of fiscal policy, income inequality. How is income distributed in an economy? Some people earn far more than others. Some economies are more unequal than others. Across all developed economies, inequality has been growing for 40 years. How do we measure this? How do we visualize it? And what role does government policy play in shaping how income gets distributed? In this video, we will introduce the concepts of income inequality, build the famous Lorenz curve, define the Gini coefficient, see how different tax structures change the distribution, and walk through several worked examples. Let us begin. Section 1. The concept of inequality. Inequality of income distribution is a simple but profound concept. In any economy, total income is divided among the population. Some families get more, some families get less. Equality of distribution would mean every family gets the same share. Inequality means some families get a larger share than others. Take a simple example. Suppose there are two households in an economy. Household A earns 5,000 shekels per month. Household B earns 15,000. Total economic income is 20,000. Household A receives 25% of total income. Household B receives 75%. Is this equal? Clearly not. Equal would mean each household gets 50%. The further the actual shares are from 50-50, the greater the inequality. Multiply this concept by millions of households, and you get a picture of an entire economy's income distribution. Measuring it precisely requires more sophisticated tools. But the basic idea is exactly this comparison between actual shares and equal shares. Section 2. Why we measure inequality. Why do economists and policymakers care about measuring inequality? 3 reasons. First, economic. High inequality tends to be associated with lower aggregate demand. Wealthy households save more of any extra income. Poor households spend it. So a more equal distribution generates more consumption per dollar of income. Second, political. Highly unequal societies tend to be politically unstable. Concentrated wealth often translates into concentrated political power, which generates resentment, populism, and sometimes violent conflict. Third, moral. Most ethical frameworks consider extreme inequality unjust, regardless of its economic or political consequences. Understanding inequality is therefore important not just for theorists, but for designing policies that work. Fiscal, monetary, and social policy all interact with the distribution of income. The first step is to measure it carefully. Section 3. A worked example, 6 households. Let us walk through a concrete example. An economy has 6 households. 3 households each earn 1,000 shekels per month. 2 households each earn 1,500 shekels. 1 household earns 4,000 shekels. Total income is 10,000. Let us compute the shares. The 3 bottom households together earn 3,000. That is 30% of total income. The 2 middle households together earn 3,000. Also 30% of total income. The single top household earns 4,000. That is 40% of total income. So we have 6 households dividing 10,000. The bottom half, 3 out of 6 households, gets 30%. The middle third, 2 out of 6 households, gets 30%. The top sixth, 1 out of 6 households, gets 40%. The top sixth gets a disproportionately large share. Already we can see inequality emerging from this simple example. Section 4. Cumulative shares. To build the Lorenz curve, we need cumulative shares. Order households from poorest to richest. Then for each cumulative position from 0 to 100% of the population, compute the cumulative share of income they collectively receive. In our 6-household example, the bottom 1/6, 16.7% of the population, receives 10% of total income. The bottom 3/6, 50% of the population, receives 30% of income. The bottom 5/6, 83% of the population, receives 60% of income. The full population, 100%, receives 100% of income by construction. These cumulative shares are the data points we use to draw the Lorenz curve. The further the cumulative share lags behind the cumulative population share, the more unequal the distribution. Section 5. The Lorenz curve. Now we draw the Lorenz curve. On the horizontal axis, we plot the cumulative share of the population from 0 to 100%. On the vertical axis, we plot the cumulative share of income from 0 to 100%. Both axes go from 0 to 100. The first reference line is the diagonal from the origin to the upper right corner. This diagonal represents perfect equality. If every household had the same income, then the cumulative share of income for any given cumulative share of the population would be exactly that population share. 20% of the population would receive 20% of the income. 50% of the population would receive 50% of the income. The cumulative line is the diagonal. The actual Lorenz curve sags below the diagonal. The poorest 20% always receives less than 20% of income. The poorest 50% always receives less than 50%. The gap between the diagonal and the actual Lorenz curve visualizes inequality. The bigger the gap, the more unequal the economy. Section 6. The Gini coefficient. The Lorenz curve gives a visual sense of inequality. The Gini coefficient gives us a single number. The Gini equals twice the area between the diagonal of equality and the Lorenz curve. By convention, it ranges from 0 to 1. A Gini of 0 means perfect equality. The Lorenz curve coincides with the diagonal. A Gini of 1 means perfect inequality. One household has everything, all others have nothing. Most countries fall between 0.25 and 0.55. The Nordic economies, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, have low Gini around 0.25 to 0.30. The United States has a Gini around 0.40. South Africa and Brazil have Gini above 0.55, among the most unequal in the world. The Gini lets us compare across countries on a single scale. It also lets us track changes within a country over time. A rising Gini means inequality is increasing. A falling Gini means inequality is decreasing. Across most developed economies, Ginis have been rising since the 1980s. Section 7. Government policy. How can the government affect inequality? Through two main channels. First, the tax system. A progressive tax structure, where higher earners pay a higher percentage of their income, reduces inequality after tax compared to before tax. A flat tax, where everyone pays the same percentage, leaves inequality roughly unchanged. A regressive tax, where lower earners pay a higher percentage, increases inequality. In practice, most modern economies use progressive income taxes, but also use VAT and excise taxes that are somewhat regressive. The net effect varies. Second, transfer payments. Cash transfers to lower-income households directly reduce inequality. Welfare, unemployment benefits, pensions, child allowances, all redistribute from taxpayers to recipients, narrowing the income gap. Across the OECD, taxes and transfers together typically reduce the pre-tax Gini by 10 to 15 points. The U.S. reduction is around 8 points. France and Belgium reduce by nearly 20 points. The choice of tax structure and transfer system is a major political battleground precisely because of these effects. Section 8. Trends and implications. What are the trends? Across developed economies, the pre-tax Gini has risen significantly since around 1980. The reasons are debated: globalization, automation, decline of unions, financial deregulation, returns to education, winner-take-all markets. The post-tax and transfer Gini has also risen, but less. Governments have used redistribution to offset some of the rising pre-tax inequality, but not all of it. Median real wages have stagnated or grown slowly. The top 1% share has roughly doubled in most developed countries. Inequality is no longer just a developing country issue. It is at the center of advanced economy politics. Populism, polarization, and policy gridlock are all in part the political consequence of rising inequality. Understanding how to measure it, how policy affects it, and what trade-offs are involved is essential macroeconomic literacy for the modern era. Conclusion. Across this three-part series, we have built the complete framework for understanding government finance and inequality. Part 1. The state budget, revenues and expenses, the fundamental T-G equation. Part 2. Deficits, debt, credit ratings, the the Maastricht Rules, Debt Sustainability. Part 3, Income Inequality, the Lorenz Curve, the Gini Coefficient, the Role of Tax Structure and Transfers. Together, these are the foundations of modern fiscal economics. Every macroeconomic debate over stimulus, austerity, redistribution, inequality, debt, ultimately rests on the concepts we have built. If you found this series useful, please share it with someone who would benefit. And subscribe to Macroeconomics with Michael for more deep dives into the foundational ideas of macroeconomic theory. Thank you for watching all 3 parts.